Today, we are starting a new series, and it is entitled, You've Got a Friend Request. So I'll get to why that's going to be the title of our new series and what we're going to be talking about in just a moment. But it's the new year. I don't know about you, but I love the beginning of a new year. You know, you kind of stop and you take inventory and what did I accomplish last year? You revisit your goals and priorities. And it's a time for a fresh start. We as a church have goals. And in fact, we said a minute ago, this is a test, we have a vision statement. What's our vision? Our vision, Longmeadow's vision is to connect people with God and others. Okay, cool. That's our vision statement. In fact, I think I might have even written it down here. How about that? Connecting people with God and others. So this vision statement provides us with an overall framework in terms of what it is that we want to do and are trying to do. And the goal of daily Bible reading, by the way, happens to tie in easily or clearly with this vision, right? Because if you're reading the Bible, hopefully you will be connecting with God in that way. So we're going to have a second focus, and this focus is on being friendly. And the reason that we're going to do this is because we have 6 core values. Now, core values are principles or priorities that we have as a church. We have 6 of them. The first one is that we are a faithful church. And we're faithful because that means that we value God's will and His Word, and we're going to be faithful in studying and reading and teaching it. Secondly, our core value is that we're friendly. To be friendly just simply means that you value other people. Third, we have a core value of being reverent. Being reverent means that we worship God in a personal way, but also corporately. We have a core value of being relevant. So we want to be relevant in the sense that we want to be flexible in the way that we do things and use everything at our disposal, which is why we're using Facebook Live and the internet and computers and Starbucks coffee. All of those are relevant. We have a priority, a core value of growing, and we want everyone to be growing in their walk with God, and we have a priority to grow as a church. And then the 6th one is going, and that is that we value mission, and we want to touch people's lives outside of the church, and so that's why we have this as a core value. So these 6 core values guide what we do, or they at least should guide what we do. And if we are falling short in any of these areas, then it makes sense for us to try to spend a little bit of time working on that. We want to be a friendly church, and we want to express value to others by what we say and by what we do. I want to give you an interesting quote. Cicero, who was a Roman philosopher, 70 years before Christ, said, "Friendship is the only thing in the world concerning the usefulness of which all mankind are agreed." So I'll put that in English. Everybody agrees that being a friend, being friendly, friendship is useful. Is there anybody that disagrees with that? Because otherwise this statement's false. Okay, we all agree with that. Friendship is very, very important. We're not always friendly, but basically what Cicero is saying is we all agree that it's helpful when we are. So what I want to do today is this. I actually want to see if we can have a baseline, a starting point to find out where we are as a church. So we're going to take a survey. It is going to be an anonymous survey, and so what I'm going to do is I see there's a bunch of guys over there, so 2 or 3 of you guys come over here real quick. Or 4, I don't care. And would you pass those out on that side, and you go to the back, and you go to the front, and you go to the nursery, wherever. Okay. And just everybody gets one of these. You know what? There's a couple of guys out in the lobby, so why don't you take it out to, one of you take them out to the guys out in the lobby. Tell them that they need to be paying attention, okay? So they're bigger than you are, so I'd say it nicely. But yeah, there's over by the door. You can just set them down for me there. Thank you. Okay, so right now your question should be, what are the questions? Okay, well, when you give something like this, some of you really like to have a lot of time to think through the answers and be very careful so that you're right. And some of you could care less and are going to answer it quickly no matter what. All right, so these are very simple questions, but what I want you to understand is there will be one of 5 answers to each of these questions, right? So on the left side is a bubble, and it goes down that column. So when I give you a statement, and by the way, those of you that are visiting with us, do me a favor, would you put a V on your page? Only because you guys may skew the church, right? You may make it look like we're friendlier than we really are, okay? We would hate for that to happen. Yeah, that's right. We got some ringers here. All right. So the visitors, just a little V, that's the only. Okay, so on the left, strongly disagree with the statement, whatever, which kind of means it never happens. Then there's somewhat disagree, it's usually not. Neither agree nor disagree means sometimes. Somewhat agree means it's usually true, or the last one is strongly agree. If you don't understand, that's fine, you'll understand here in a second. Okay, here you go. So I'm going to ask you to fill in the bubbles. Ready? First question. Whenever I see someone in church that I don't know, I go and introduce myself. Okay, so strongly agree, always, usually not, or maybe, sometimes, whatever. Okay, fill in the bubble. Got it. Second question. I generally wait. This is just kind of in life. I generally wait for people to talk to me before I talk to them. Okay? Agree, strongly agree, disagree, whatever the case may be. Third question. I intentionally smile when I greet people. Okay? Not you're going to because I asked the question, but you actually did on the way in this morning. Okay? Fourth question. Friendliness is very important to me. Friendliness. Oh, by the way, do you guys all have pens? I have extra pens here. Does anybody need a pen? I didn't even ask. I'm sorry. Strongly disagree. Those of you that don't want to have pens didn't mention it. Okay. I came equipped. Okay. Last question. I'm more friendly in my heart, that is inside, than I express in my actions outside. Okay? Got it? All right. Gentlemen, would you collect the papers again for me, please? Yeah, I'll leave those up there in case somebody didn't have a pen and they just have a pen now. I'm sorry. Your papers will be graded and returned to you by the end of class. No. Actually, hand them all to my wife there, would you please? Yeah. Got it? Everybody got it? Oh, that's right. Give it to Margaret, please. And hey, Steve, if you're out there in the lobby, in fact, those of you at home could be doing this too. Paul, I hope you wrote all the answers out, okay? And these questions are actually in the YouVersion Bible app. I put them there, so you could have actually looked at them there too. But anyway, so as we think about the topic of friendship, friendship is something that means different things to different people, and it's even different depending upon the context. So you go to the dictionary, you look up the word friendly or friend, and so the first meaning of it is kind of the one that we assume. A friend is a person who is attached to another person by feelings of affection or personal regard. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then some of the other definitions kind of go in a little bit different directions. Number two, a person who gives assistance, a patron. For example, a friend of, or friends of the Boston Symphony, right? Yeah, so when you provide assistance to a charitable organization. How about this? A person who's on good terms. For example, in war, right? There's a guard. What's the guard say? Who's coming? Friend or foe? Okay? Now, that's a very specific meaning to the word friend that's used to think of people from the same nation, same political party. If you put a capital F at the beginning when you say friend, it actually refers to a religious organization. Which one? The Friends. Okay, good. And they are the Quakers. Yeah, I did a walk through the Bible seminar in a little tiny Quaker church. I don't know if there's any other kind, but in central Illinois. It was really a beautiful church. It was a long time ago. The last thing, and this is one that we are very familiar with. I think we're all familiar with. It is a contact on social media, right? How many of you have friends that you've never met on Facebook, right? How many of you? I do. You know, it's a friend of a friend, and somebody contacts you, and it's like, I want to be your friend, right? You can explain to him later how that works. Okay. So we have friends, right? I looked at my Facebook. I don't know what it is. I got 1,100 friends or 1,200 friends or something. I don't have that many. Those are contacts for my social media. So these definitions are good. They point out that the word friend has a range of meanings. But now let's think about categorizing friends. How do we categorize them? You say, I don't categorize friends. Are they a friend or not? Well, actually, we do. So one way that we categorize friends is based upon how well we know them. For example, casual friends, right? There are people that are friends, and this is more than an acquaintance. I'm not even going to use the word acquaintance. Acquaintance is maybe like Facebook friend. But these are casual friends. We would say hello to them pretty much anytime we see them. Then let's just use the word friend. We're going to throw family in. Family are supposed to be friends. Supposed to be. We'll get to that in a minute. And then finally, we have close or intimate friend. Now, there's other ways that you can categorize friends, right? I mean, there are loyal friends, and there's brutally honest, confident friends, and mentor friends, and everything. But I think this is going to suffice for us right now. I think it's interesting, and maybe a lot of us understand this, that there are people who have family members who aren't friends, right? Yeah, some family members don't like each other, don't spend time with each other. They're related, but they're not friends. And to drive this point home, have you ever been surprised when you learned that, like, a brother and sister were best friends? Did that kind of go like, wow, that's kind of cool. Now, if they're twins, it's kind of a given, right? They tend to be that. Do we have some twins? I see somebody look there. We got a twin? Yeah. Are you guys best friends? Yeah, of course. Right. I don't know why that works, but it does. But when we hear that non-twins, siblings are best friends, it's like, wow, that's cool. But it's cool because it's unusual. How many of you would say that your best friend or one of your best friends is a family member other than a spouse? It looks like we got a couple of friends sitting right there. That's very good. All right. Well, we've got a smattering, which is really pretty cool. That's really good. So today we're beginning this new series called You Have a Friend Request. And I'm taking it as a play on words, of course, from Facebook. And if you use Facebook and you open it up, sometimes it'll have a Facebook friend request. And you have certain options, don't you? Which is really kind of sad. One option is to confirm, and one option is what? Delete. Delete the friend request, okay? So we're going to talk about friends, and the question is, when I say, okay, we're going to talk about friends and being friendly, well, what kind of a friend is it that we're talking about? Well, for the purposes of our time together, what we're going to do is I'm going to suggest that the core elements of being a friend really are present in all of those. Okay, now obviously if the family member and you are not in a relationship and are hostile, then it's going to be a little bit different. But with these, there are 4 core elements that are part of friendship. And if you are a friend with someone, you're going to have those. Now, what will differ is the level of engagement of these principles. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a Bible story. If you have your Bibles, you can turn to the book of Ruth. Ruth chapter 1. And I could give you background on the book of Ruth, but the author actually does the best job himself. Okay, it was maybe Samuel who wrote the book, we're not sure. But let's begin reading Ruth chapter 1 and verse 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. So the author gives us this introduction to the story, really in just these broad strokes, but in doing so gives us enough of the story to set up the basic dilemma of the book. What's the tension? What is the book about? Well, it's how this widow, Naomi, is going to survive in a male-dominated society that was really not friendly to women. So Naomi went from wife to widow, from mother to no mother. In that society, her identity, much like our society today, was completely wrapped up within this, and she was stripped of this. Her security from her husband and from her children was gone. You could even say her worth was just stripped away. She was a stranger in a foreign land, and one of the commentators I read put it very well. She was a victim of death and of life. So the story continues in verse 6. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing them food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. So here was some good news. At least it seemed like there was good news. The famine in Israel was over. Yahweh had come to the aid of his people. So the underlying question in the book is this: would he also come to the aid of this widow, Naomi? One of the reasons why we read the Bible, one of the reasons why we study the Bible, is because God is consistent in how he acts and how he reacts and how he addresses our needs. Like Naomi, we all face trials in life, and some of them are devastating. But like Naomi, we also see that God comes through. And it was Naomi seeing that God came through for Israel that gave her just enough hope that prompted her to return to Israel. The text doesn't say that, but it's implied the way the author has written this. So my question for you right now is, do you need God to come through for you today? Well, the question is, are you moving toward him, or are you moving away from him? So here's Naomi, who was this foreigner in the land of Moab. She decided to return to her home people. Now, make sure we understand. Her problem wasn't a lack of food. It was the personal loss. It was the feeling of emptiness that afflicted her. We see this really clearly in the next few verses, which are the first dialogue in the book. Verse 8, then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you've shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. And she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud. And then they said to her, we will go back with you to your people. So Naomi confronted her problem head on. What was it that was motivating her? It was her heartache. She actually commanded, the grammatical form of the words there was, she commanded Orpah and Ruth to leave. But she prayed that God, that Yahweh might bless them with husbands, something that she couldn't in her wildest dreams ever hope to give them. If she couldn't give them husbands, that would only add to her heartache. So she was resigned to go it alone. If they were to return with her, it was likely that they were going to experience the same plight that she was. By them going with her, they would be strangers and widows in a foreign land, exactly what it was that she was leaving. But they said no. They were going to stay with her. So Naomi spoke again, and she made this impassioned plea as to why they should obey. Verse 11, but Naomi said, return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I'm too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me. So Naomi gave them 3 reasons why they should go back. In the Old Testament, they had this weird kind of thing called the levirate marriage, okay? And it was this, that if a man died, his brother was obligated to marry that woman, and they had multiple wives in those days, and become the husband to provide his brother with children to continue his family name. So that's what she's talking about here. If she had other sons, they could marry Orpah and Ruth, but she didn't have a husband, and even if she did, it would take so long for that to happen to them, and would they wait? But her third reason was simply life was just too bitter for her. She said the Lord was against her. And she didn't want them to share her fate. Now, it would be easy for us to say that these words were motivated by bitterness. And it's true that she was bitter, but I don't think that was what was behind these comments. Rather, I believe it really was her friendship with these 2 women. You see, the first core characteristic of friendship is that friendship is about the other person. Friends always have the best interests of another person in mind. Naomi's life had been one trial and disappointment after another. It started with a famine in the land, and there was the hardship of moving. Then her husband died. Then there was the good news, her sons got married, but then they died. She's a widow living in this land. And at that point, it was like she didn't want them to experience what she was experiencing. Maybe she was Job's cousin. No, probably not. She seemed like it. She loved and was really a true friend to Orpah and Ruth by making this compelling case for them to leave her. She could expect no better for them than she expected for herself, and she wanted to release them from that. Verse 14 says, at this they wept aloud again. And by the way, all three of them were weeping because they understood the full implications of this. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law. Goodbye. Orpah left. The text, the author, doesn't condemn her, and neither should we. She made a choice. But verse 14 continues. But Ruth clung to her. Yet another surprise. But Naomi doesn't give up. Verse 15, look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and to her gods. Go back with her. So Orpah left, and by doing so, she reduced some of Naomi's future pain of watching these young women live as widows in a foreign land, which was exactly what she was experiencing. She implored Ruth, follow Orpah. But she wouldn't. And instead, she responded with an eloquent declaration, so moving, so unexpected, that it disarmed Naomi from any further attempt to dissuade her. But Ruth replied. And I can imagine it was with those tears and softly, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, even if death separates you and me. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So in exactly the same way that Naomi was trying to protect Ruth and Orpah from pain, Ruth wanted to unselfishly protect Naomi from pain. She acted in a way that had the best interest of her friend at heart. Now, there are three other principles that we see here from this. So the first is it's about the other person. The second is that friendship is free of duty or obligation. Now, remember, they were probably at the border of Israel and Judah. And it was kind of almost like if you take a step further, you're committing to this. And at that moment in time, Naomi releases them from any family responsibility, any cultural responsibility, any societal obligation to stay with her. And she commanded them to leave. So why didn't Ruth leave? Because she wasn't just Naomi's daughter-in-law. She was her friend. She didn't act out of obligation. There are many times in life that we do things because we feel obligated. And you know what? It's okay. But don't think that you're being a friend if you do something out of a sense of obligation, okay? Friends don't bring a gift to the party because they feel obligated. They bring a gift to the party. They bring flowers to the party because they want to see the joy in the host of the party. They want to spread joy. Friendship is free of duty or obligation, but friendship doesn't seek personal benefit. What was the most personally beneficial thing that Ruth could have done? Turn around and go back. She was young, She was somewhat attractive, as we learn later in the book. She had the expectation she could have come up with another husband. There was nothing at that moment in time that Ruth expected other than a hard, difficult life ahead. She was committed to accompanying Naomi in a foreign land and taking care of her for absolutely no expected return for the rest of Naomi's life. She wasn't just committed to being a friend. She was committed to paying a price to be her friend. And then the last thing we see is really cool, and that is friendship transcends age, race, or religion. So these women, different ages, different generations, different nationalities. Yes, Moab and Israel, they're kind of close, but they're still different. And definitely different religions. Do you remember that Orpah went back to her god, small g? But what Ruth did was she just brushed all of those differences aside as if they were trivial, but they weren't. I mean, think about it. Who are your friends? We have friends like us that are close to our age, that are from our same social or cultural background or religious background. Every now and then, God allows us to have friends that are very different from us. Margaret and I, when we got married, we lived in New York City, and we went to an intercultural church. It wasn't, New York City is cosmopolitan, right? And so at church, it wasn't that there were whites and blacks and Hispanics. There were certainly that. But the blacks were Jamaican or Kenyan or from Nairobi. They were actually from there and had recently been transplanted. And so, and then the Hispanics, many of the Hispanics were from Puerto Rico. And as we had the opportunity to become friends, we discovered a richness in that friendship. There's also a richness in becoming friends with people that are older than you. When Margaret and I got married, there was another couple that got married the week after we did. And Russ was my dad's age, but he had been divorced many years before. He'd become a believer and met a woman, and he and this woman in their, at that time, mid-60s, became missionaries with Campus Crusade for Christ. And we became really good friends with Russ and Ruth, even though they were our parents' age. If we're willing to put the time in to overcome the barriers of age and race and religion, we'll find a rich treasure of diversity in our friendship. So here's how we're going to tie this all together. I've suggested to you that the theme of the book is loss and emptiness afflicting Naomi. And so what was Ruth doing? Well, it says that Ruth clung to Naomi. And may I say to you that she clung to her both physically and emotionally. Because friends cling. They cling when they are needed. How do you cling? Well, rarely do we actually cling by hanging on, although that could happen. But we cling by being in our friend's life when they need us. And that clinging can be as simple as a phone call. It can be as simple as a conversation. It can be to spend time with, to ask questions, to dig a little bit deeper below the surface. But clinging to a friend also means that we put up with their quirks, right? Everybody else in the world is weird except for you and me, right? Yeah, look, they're all weird out there. We know that. We're all weird. But a friend doesn't let the weirdness push us away. Because there are many things in life, and sometimes it's even the misunderstanding of a missed phone call or an unreturned email that can put some uncertainty in the relationship, and we begin to think of something wrong. But no, we're going to cling through that, and we're going to press through that, because as we do, we will demonstrate that we are a friend. So I kind of want to tie this together for you in an interesting way. Because in a sense, the book of Ruth is really a parable about God and us. Because if you know the rest of the story, spoiler alert, Ruth gets married, okay? And Naomi ends up becoming the great grandmother of David. And all the way down the line, who? Jesus. She thinks her life is worthless and nothing good is ever going to happen, and she becomes the great-grandmother many generations back of the Messiah. So the book of Ruth is a parable about how God loves us and how he has reached out to us and how he won't give up on us, even though at times we aren't very friendly to him.